Beach bums by day, felons by night. Two surfers get in over their heads when they steal the most famous star sapphire in the world. On a warm summer evening in 1964, actress Ava Gabor and her husband Richard Brown were returning to their hotel in New York City when they ran into some trouble.
No, I think they're new to the area. Photo right there.
Brown unmasked one of the robbers.
Put your hands down. Back up. Come here.
But after a brief glimpse of the man's face, found himself staring down the barrel of a gun.
Hurry it up. You watch, come on. Stop moving.
The couple did as they were told, and the thieves made off with a staggering $50,000 in jewels.
Do you recognize anybody in here?
The NYPD asked the couple to go through some mugshots.
Pretty scary for you.
None of the faces looked familiar, and for good reason. The assailants were not from New York. They were from Miami, Florida. In appearance, Alan Kuhn and his friend, Jack Murphy, a.k.a. Murph the Surf, were professional beach bums. They spent most of their time surfing and worked part-time jobs as cabana boys. But their lifestyle suggested another source of income. 26-year-old Kuhn had recently paid cash for a new Cadillac convertible. He also owned a yacht and an upscale condominium on Biscayne Bay. He and his 27-year-old partner, Murphy, had a reputation for being con men, using their charm and good looks to take advantage of wealthy female tourists. The authorities suspected the two playboys were involved in several crimes, but lacked the evidence needed to arrest them. Miami police kept the men under surveillance, waiting for them to slip up.
They were a different brand of wild and crazy guy. They liked the wild lifestyle that they lived, and I think being thieves and engaging in these daring crimes was part of their own kind of mystique about themselves.
In October, they returned to New York in search of another score. Their first stop was the Cambridge Hotel, where they joined their friend and crime partner, Roger Clark.
Trip okay?
Come on in. I'll be right in.
Clark was a fellow beach bum who had left Miami weeks earlier. He had rented a 3-bedroom suite at the Cambridge to serve as their base of operations.
Your name? Josh. Thanks.
The men hit the town every night, and after making the scene at all the hot spots, the party continued back at the hotel. But their days were spent enjoying more cultural pursuits, such as strolling through the American Museum of Natural History. They were typical tourists, except in one regard. They returned to the museum day after day, always to the 4th floor and the J.P. Morgan Hall of Gems and Minerals, home to one of the most spectacular collections of gemstones in existence. The centerpiece of the exhibit was the fabulous Star of India.
It weighs over 500 carats. It has a very, very fine star, and it's monstrous in the world of phenomenal gemstones. Something over 500 carats is extraordinarily large.
Security in the gem hall seemed surprisingly lax. Neither the display cases nor the windows showed any sign of being connected to an alarm. The men also visited areas of the museum most patrons never saw, such as the 5th floor offices of the museum's staff. Kuhn studied the museum's layout. He read up on the gem collection from a book he acquired from the gift shop. While the all-night parties continued in their suite, he formulated his plan. On the evening of October 29th, 1964, Kuhn, Murphy, and Clark put the plan into action. Taking care to avoid the museum's small force of security guards, they broke into a side door. They made their way to the 5th floor and entered one of the offices. They were directly above the Hall of Gems. Although the interior entrance to the Hall of Gems was secured by a locked iron gate, the windows were left open a few inches for ventilation. Getting in was no problem. The burglary was going as planned. The men were safely inside, and no alarms had sounded. Outside, Clark kept an anxious watch, while Kuhn and Murphy prepared to make the greatest score of their lives. Only a thin pane of glass stood between the thieves and their prize.
Murph, we got it.
When Kuhn lifted up the Star of India's sapphire, he saw it was resting on an alarm sensor. They resorted to Plan B. Hours had passed, and Roger Clark feared his friends had been caught. just as he was about to give up on them, the thieves appeared. They quickly made their getaway. No one responded to the alarm. The next morning, Kuhn and Murphy headed to JFK International Airport and took an early flight to Miami. So did Kuhn's new girlfriend, 19-year-old Janet Flakowitz, but she was traveling alone. Kuhn had told her to pretend not to know him and had given her a briefcase with strict instructions not to look inside. Roger Clark also left the city, bound for his parents' house in Connecticut.
Hello, Mr. Clark. Hey,
Before the burglary was discovered, the thieves were long gone. Later that morning, a custodian was opening the fourth-floor galleries when his routine was broken. The authorities descended on the museum, with the press only moments behind. Detectives combed the hall for physical evidence, but thousands of visitors passed through the museum each day, and any fingerprints they found would be of little use. 24 gems were missing, including 3 irreplaceable jewels: the DeLong ruby, the Midnight Star sapphire, and the Star of India. The enormity of the theft was shocking, as was the ease with which it had been accomplished. The curator had personally armed the security system the night before, and the removal of the stone should have tripped it.
As we visited the scene after the commission of the burglary, of course the first thing we asked was about the alarm system. And I took a look at the wires and touched them, and the wires came away in my hands as dust.
It was clear to Assistant DA Maurice Nadjari that the security system hadn't been maintained for years.
And all they had to do was break the glass, and they had it. And they were gone, without a trace.
By afternoon, the sensational robbery had made national news.
Let's look at national headlines. The top story in Tri-State News: the burglary of New York's American Museum of Natural History. More than 20 gems were taken by the thief or thieves. New York City police have no suspects and no leads at this time. In Brooklyn last night, an apartment fire caused extensive damage in the Flatbush neighborhood. And the Yankees wrapped up their homestand last night with an 8-4 loss.
Back on their home turf in Miami, Kuhn and Murphy took part of their haul to one of their usual receivers. The small, unrecognizable stones could be easily fenced, but the Star of India would be much more difficult.
This was a famous gemstone, and more famous because it was in the museum's collection, and certainly was not easy to simply offer for sale on the open market. Who would have bought such a thing?
Later that afternoon, in New York, police got their first real lead.
An informer spoke to a vice cop. And the informer said, you know, I read about the museum burglary, and I don't know whether the information I have will be of any value to you, but I went to a party last night, and I heard them talking about Miami, New York, a big heist. When I walked into the bedroom, I saw a blueprint of the American Museum of Natural History.
Did a great job.
Little did the officer know that his $2 thank you to the bellhop would crack open a multi-million-dollar case. The room was registered to Alan Kuhn, Jack Murphy, and Roger Clark. Running a check on the names, authorities discovered their criminal pasts and obtained a search warrant.
You check those out, I think.
Inside the hotel room, detectives found plenty of evidence that they had the right men, including glass cutters, a crowbar, and other burglary tools. There was broken glass embedded in the sole of a shoe. They also found the gem book on the Morgan collection with the museum brochure and snapshots tucked between the pages.
Interesting information.
The men hadn't cleaned up, and they hadn't checked out, so the detectives settled in and waited.
We just need to make sure that we continue going through everything.
When Roger Clark returned later that evening, he walked right into their trap.
They immediately placed Clark under arrest. After some persuasion, Clark finally told the entire story of what happened.
One day after the robbery, the first suspect was in custody. But there was no sign of the jewels. Back at the condo on Biscayne Bay, Murph the Surf and Alan Kuhn were laying low when they had some unexpected visitors.
Who's that?
The FBI, acting in cooperation with the New York police, arrested Kuhn and Murphy in Miami, 2 days after the theft of the Star of India.
Let's go. Back up. Back up. It's all right, girls. Don't move.
The men were extradited back to New York to face charges. But the jewels were still nowhere to be found.
So, Murphy, what brought you into New York City?
Here these guys came up from Florida. They were arraigned. They looked like each of them had $1 million in the bank. They were high style, well tanned, good looking, well spoken, and nothing in the world was going to break these guys. By this time, Clark had recanted. So really, we had a rather weak case.
Kuhn and Murphy flatly denied any involvement in the crime. Without Clark's testimony to contradict them, Assistant DA Najari needed another angle.
So you're telling me
He went after the courier,
months. You were his girlfriend.
Janet
You didn't know
Flakowitz.
about this heist that he's planning? The biggest heist this country
At first, she claimed ignorance. But under intense interrogation, the 19-year-old broke down and admitted she'd peeked into the briefcase.
Folks, they're not. They're evil people. They've got criminal records.
She told me the entire story, that she had seen it, seen the gems, she knew they were the gems from the museum, and implicated the defendants very, very well.
Najari took the case into the judge and requested high bail.
We argued and argued and argued that these men would fly, that they were a danger to the community, nothing would cut any ice. Low bail, $2,500.
Kuhn, Murphy, and Clark easily made bail and were released. Then came another blow, as Flakowitz, claiming she'd been bullied by her interrogators, went back on her story. Najari's case was falling apart. Upon their release, the press treated the three criminals like celebrities. They reveled in the attention and continued to proclaim their innocence. Najari decided to try a new approach.
My feeling was that these free spirits would never break. And probably I didn't stand much of a chance on trial. They would never break unless I could zap them of their freedom. And I went through all of the violent robbery files. And I came up with two that seemed to follow the pattern and seemed to fit the description of these three guys. One of them was the robbery of Ava Gabor, the actress.
Najari brought Ava Gabor to New York City, and she positively identified her assailants as Jack Murphy and Alan Kuhn. The men were arrested again, and this time the bail was set at $250,000 apiece, a sum impossible for the thieves to raise. Faced with the prospect of hard time on Rikers Island, Kuhn decided to cut a deal. In return for a 1-year sentence for each of them, he would help recover the jewels. but the judge refused to release Kuhn without bail. Najari took matters into his own hands before the star was lost forever.
He had promised us that he would get the gems overnight. Take me to Florida tonight. I'll get the gems for you tonight. We'll be back in New York tomorrow. And so I told the detectives that we're going to kidnap the guy.
In the custody of Assistant DA Najari and New York Detective Richard Molina, Kuhn flew south to make good on his promise.
Hey, it's Alan.
Upon their arrival, Kuhn was recognized, and news spread that he was back in Miami. Reporters soon began to gather outside their hotel.
Hey, it's Kuhn.
With all of the media attention, none of Kuhn's contacts were willing to talk to him. Recovering the gems overnight would be impossible. Najari had some explaining to do.
I called the district attorney, Frank Hogan, my boss, told him what I had done, thinking I better cover myself somehow. He said, well, Maury, I'll tell you what. If you recover the gems, come back. If you don't, go south to Argentina. I don't want to see you because I won't defend you for kidnapping. So find them or never come back to New York.
Kuhn enjoyed all the commotion, making the most of the attention while it lasted. He knew the moment he found the jewels, he'd have to trade the Miami sunshine for a New York City jail cell. To Kuhn's delight and Najari's chagrin, the quest for the gems was front-page news.
Not that I know of.
Najari kept the pressure on, threatening to return Kuhn to prison with or without the gems.
Look at that. Stars.
Recovering them was the jewel thief's only chance for a deal.
Kuhn kept making phone calls. We kept changing motels because we kept getting spotted by people. We must have been in 4 or 5 different motels.
After 4 days, a retired Miami jeweler named Hy Gordon came forward and agreed to act as a go-between. Following instructions from an anonymous source, Gordon and Detective Malim drove to an all-night coffee shop. Once there, they were to wait inside for half an hour, leaving their car unlocked. When they returned to the car, a note and a key were waiting for them. The note led Detective Malim to the Miami bus terminal. If the jeweler's tip paid off, he'd find $500,000 in jewels stashed in a 25-cent locker. There, along with 8 other gems, including the Midnight Star, the detective recovered the Star of India.
The Assistant District Attorney Najari, my office, went to Florida, and they have been engaged in an effort to recover jewels stolen on October 29th from the American Museum of Natural History. They returned this morning with 9 of the 24 jewels have been stolen.
We did not recover the DeLong ruby. That was not amongst them. There was a second receiver who was holding on to that. We didn't get it. And I told Kuhn that we had recovered 9 gems, not 24, that there was no deal.
Because Kuhn was unable to hold up his end of the bargain, he, Clark, and Murph the Surf were each sentenced to 3 years on Rikers Island. The Star of India sapphire was put back on display in the museum under much tighter security. The DeLong Star ruby and 5 other stones were recovered a year later without the help of the thieves. 9 of the gems from the collection were never recovered. He was a high-rise cat burglar whose ambitions were loftier than most. Even a 30-story window was within his grasp, and he had authorities climbing the walls. He preyed on those who thought they were safe. He struck only the finest homes. He knew what he wanted and where to get it. That could be said of any cat burglar, but this man was different. He not only defied the law, he defied the law of gravity. He would climb 5 stories, 10 or more, to reach residents high above the ground. Without ropes, without a net, and without being noticed. Miami Beach, Florida may seem like paradise. But like any city, it has its share of crime. For the wealthy who live here, the balmy climate and high-rise vistas make the problems easy to overlook. The towering condos that dot these shores are like fortresses, equipped with video cameras, security guards, and state-of-the-art alarm systems. People living in these towers felt out of harm's reach. But then, a favorite necklace would turn up missing. A favorite brooch would disappear. Without any signs of a break-in, some victims suspected their housekeepers. On November 3rd, 1996, Miami Beach police began to learn the truth behind the thefts. Units on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors of a Collins Avenue condominium had been robbed the night before.
And as I started to look in the box...
Don't touch it. John, can you go ahead and... Excuse me.
The burglar had a sharp eye. He grabbed only cash and real gems,
Maybe we can...
leaving the costume jewelry behind.
I can dust it in a few minutes.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
The victims admitted to detectives that they never locked their balcony doors.
I see we have jewelry left there, but that's costume jewelry.
Okay.
I went out to the balcony after not being able to find any forced entry to the doors, and at that time, I really went out to enjoy the view. It's pretty high up, and there's a beautiful water view.
Everything was fine until my wife noticed her jewelry.
And what I was able to see at the glass door is what we started to call the half-moon impression.
Hey, John, come out and look at this.
Where you would take your nose and smush your nose up against the glass to look in, and then put your hand up to cut the glare to look in.
It was a peculiar smudge to see outside of a 5th floor window. They found the same mark outside the other 2 units.
This way, so, okay, that looks like...
If the balcony was the point of entry, how did the burglar get there?
And after leaning out, I noticed scuff marks that were coming up the side of the wall.
You think he came from...
The burglar was a climber. Detectives checked the roof to see if he'd left any clues, but he apparently never made it that far.
He had to come from the top.
We went up to the roof and we looked around. The scuff marks did not go that high. They were only below the 5th level, going in the downward direction.
Detectives were astonished to discover that the culprit had climbed up from the ground, spanning the 12-foot gaps between balconies. He had no drain pipe to shimmy up. There was no evidence he'd used ropes or a grappling hook. Miami Beach police weren't sure what they were dealing with. They had never seen anything like it before. They contacted other jurisdictions to see if similar burglaries had been reported.
I'll be clear from the 2200 scene.
2 weeks later, 50 miles away, a Palm Beach condo was robbed. Alerted by Miami police, investigators knew what to look for. The half-moon impression on the balcony door. The criminal's impeccable taste. And the scuff marks down the side of the building. The burglar hit 10 units in a single night. The MO was identical. The thief, whoever he was as methodical as he was agile.
He was able to pick the most expensive items, and he knew exactly where they were. He didn't have to do any ransack or any searching. No pillowcases were stolen to carry the jewelry out.
He had a system that worked. And with a range of 50 miles, the high-rise robber was going to be a challenge to catch.
We're going to enter that in.
Soon, similar break-ins were reported all over South Florida. In Fort Lauderdale, Ball Harbor, Boca Raton, and Cocoa Beach. Someone was scaling high-rises and making off with jewels.
9 o'clock tomorrow. Very good.
The robbers' range spread to a 300-mile radius.
Yes, task force tomorrow. We should have everything online.
This nightmare for law enforcement became a field day for journalists. Tessie Borden of the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel knew a good story when she heard one. She was one of the many reporters intrigued with the burglar's prowess.
And had it not been for the kind of MO that he used, it would have been another burglary story, like a lot of them in South Florida. I mean, you just don't hear of burglars climbing up the sides of buildings. In his case, from what police say, he climbed as high as 30 stories at one point. I couldn't do that.
Along with millions in jewels, he stole the public's imagination. Though the police tried to downplay the story, this bigger-than-life villain soon earned a nickname.
The police were describing his MO, and I think at one point one of the reporters said, "Oh, you mean like Spider-Man?" And the police said, "Yeah." And from then on, he was known as Spider-Man.
Spider-Man cast his web far and wide. It was only a matter of time until somebody spotted him. While South Florida police cast their dragnet, Spider-Man conducted his business as usual. But one night, he was caught off guard. A man in Miami was the first to catch a glimpse of the notorious burglar. But just a glimpse. In a flash, Spider-Man slipped down 8 stories and disappeared into the night. The witness saw enough to provide a composite sketch. Now, police knew to look for a muscular black male, 180 to 200 pounds, in his mid-20s to early 30s. Soon, other witnesses saw him too. They confirmed what investigators could hardly believe. He scaled the buildings without ropes or tools, relying totally on his own body strength. He climbed higher and higher, getting away with millions. The well-to-do, who paid a premium for the security of their luxury towers, found they weren't getting the protection they had paid for.
They were just in amazement that anybody could scale that high and come into their little corner of the world. People that live in the condos that we spoke to felt that because they lived high up, they had their own little security force, they felt that they were immune to the outside world violating them.
Spider-Man had South Florida's undivided attention. Each caper became a media event.
I never, locked the sliding doors. I mean, 4th floor.
But that all changed after she became a victim of the now infamous Spider-Man. Cleaned out of her jewelry last fall, police say Spider-Man paid her condo a repeat visit just 3 weeks ago.
I'm still, I'm scared, living here. Everything is locked. I feel like I'm in jail living in my own place.
More than a year had passed since police first suspected a climber. Spider-Man had struck dozens of buildings, but police were no closer to catching him. The break-ins were so clean, some victims didn't realize they were hit until long after.
There were several instances in which police didn't get the report of the theft until several weeks later, when the victims noticed that a particular piece of jewelry was missing. And they looked for it in their safe, they looked for it in their bank box, and they never found it. So then they reported it missing. By that time, it was probably already sold.
How you doing? Is the manager in? Thank you. How you doing, sir? Yeah.
Police visited several pawn shops and jewelry stores, but did not find any of the stolen jewelry. Spider-Man was becoming as mythical and mysterious as his comic book namesake.
How you doing today?
He appeared to be unstoppable.
We're looking for some jewelry.
As Spider-Man's trail grew cold, the public's interest in the thefts heated up.
Last week, Spider-Man has struck again in Miami, hitting apartments in this Coconut Grove building and this building in Brickell. At this Brickell Avenue high-rise, Spider-Man started off easy enough, scaling the walls to a 3rd-floor balcony, then going 1 floor up to apartment 402, then 7 stories higher to the 11th floor.
By early 1998, police sought a pattern to the Spider-Man's capers. They reviewed every case report and re-interviewed the victims, hoping to find something they may have overlooked. They discovered that Spider-Man had stolen something more than jewels and cash.
How about the credit cards?
The credit cards! Oh yes, the credit cards!
Detectives interviewed 40 to 50 of the Spider-Man's victims and learned that besides their cash and jewels, many had taken another hit. He had stolen their credit cards. They didn't realize it until a month or 2 later when they received their bills. At that point, they contacted their credit card companies, but not the police.
There's nothing they're going to do about it.
Credit card transactions are easier to track than cash or jewels. Many of the purchases occurred at Villaman Tires. 7 charges totaling $10,000 had been made in a 2-week period. The proprietor remembered the transactions. The buyer, a black man, had ordered custom mag gold and silver rims for a green Ford Explorer. He returned on several occasions to purchase more tires and rims.
Okay, I can have. Can you give me like a printout or something?
Investigators hoped their efforts were about to pay off. Detectives combed the neighborhood looking for the green Explorer.
West Elliott 1, Lincoln Adam, David Young, John, Bill 101.
Finding no sign of the vehicle, they tried a different approach. The driver of the Explorer had made several charges at a gas station in Miami Lakes. That's where Hallman began spending his lunch hour.
After a month or so at sitting in Amico, it seemed a little bleak, but I still had hope. I said, eventually, this vehicle is going to roll in here.
We're sitting around here doing this.
Finally, a car matching the description pulled in to fill up. A black male was driving it. Hallman thought he'd found his Spider-Man. But his hopes were dashed in an instant.
Victor Tango Lima 261.
He was 6 foot tall, and he was just too big to do any type of climbing.
Even so, Hallman decided to trail the Explorer. They were led to a house in Oakland Park. Moments later, Hallman's hunch was confirmed when a man matching the description of Spider-Man left the house. He drove off in another vehicle. Detectives followed. The driver stopped at 2 houses in a suburb of Dade County. When detectives called in the addresses, they learned that both belonged to a man named Derek James.
No traffic, it's unnecessary.
A background check revealed that real estate wasn't his only passion. James had 18 felony convictions, including one in 1994 for stealing $25,000 worth of jewelry. In the 1994 arrest report, Detective Hallman found what he was looking for.
In the officer's comments, he wrote that Derek James had paint transfer on his clothing as if he had laid or slid against a wall. So that was our first indication that he may in fact be a climber. We have apartments that are burglarized, we have jewelry that's taken, and the paint transfer really perked our interest.
The report suggested that Derek James may have been climbing at least since 1994, but he'd been falling long before his arrest. In the 1980s, James had trained as an Army paratrooper and had made hundreds of jumps. He was no stranger to heights. Investigators had enough evidence on James to get a court order to put a tracking device on his SUV. They assembled a surveillance team to keep their eye on him. June 21st, 1998, Derek James was on the move. The surveillance team was trailing, hoping to catch the Spider-Man in action.
Headquarters, notify state police.
I've got him.
Where do you have him?
South on 32.
He headed down Brickell Avenue to the Bristol Towers, one of Miami's most exclusive condominium communities. It had been robbed before, so security at the towers was tight. The detectives waited for James to make his move. Then they lost him. They split up to cover more ground.
I can't see anything.
A security guard spotted Detective Hallman. Hallman offered his badge and asked him if he had seen anything suspicious.
Short guy.
I've been out on my shift
An hour had passed with no sign of James.
Nothing up here.
No, it's nothing at all.
Detective Hallman returned to the front of the building just in time. James was getting away.
That's our guy, that's our guy. Let's go!
They called in the highway patrol.
528 dispatch.
James was pulled over for speeding. Police discovered he was driving with a suspended license and had violated his parole. But his troubles were just beginning. On the console was the evidence they needed.
Right here. Need anything?
One item, a bracelet, was engraved with the name of a Bristol Towers victim. Initially, Derek James was charged with 1 count each of grand theft and burglary. But even unmasked, the Spider-Man remained an intriguing character. Part of his mystique stemmed from the fact that he appeared so ordinary. He was never extravagant or flashy. His neighbors never suspected that he was a master cat burglar. He had used his wealth to buy properties, which he kept well maintained. He was apparently a conscientious landlord. His audacious reputation was capped when the media revealed that his girlfriend was an ex-probation officer.
Just the way that he was able to walk around and buy all these properties, act like a real estate mogul, the way that he was even dating a probation officer was fascinating to me, because most of the time you would expect a burglar to try and stay away from people who are connected to law enforcement.
To make sure he appeared in court, Spider-Man's bail was set at $1 million. At a jailhouse news conference, James vehemently denied being the Spider-Man. He insisted he didn't have the physique for that kind of work. He said he won his wealth at the trial. With James in jail, the condominium burglaries stopped. Miami and all of southern Florida became a little less jittery. Peace returned to paradise. Spider-Man's trial lasted just over a week. A Miami jeweler sealed his fate when he testified that Derek James had sold him $8 million worth of jewelry over 4 years. On December 8, 1998, James was convicted of burglary and grand theft in the Bristol Towers case. He was sentenced to 30 years, 20 of them mandatory. Derek James still faces charges in Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, Boca Raton, and Cocoa Beach, Florida. The tangled tale of Spider-Man is just beginning to unravel.
Gentlemen.
An unlikely gang of thieves crack an impenetrable fortress, pulling off the crime of the century. Disappearing with their millions, they confound police and capture the imagination of the country. Post-World War II Boston was a city of social extremes. While Blue Bloods occupied Beacon Hill, blue-collar immigrants kept their factories humming. At a mere 75 cents an hour, this hard labor was paid for with hard cash. Each payday, tens of thousands of dollars flowed into company counting rooms.
There's a figure! There's a figure! Put your hand I can see him! Get down the ground! Get down the ground! Get down!
They became natural targets for a gang of crooks looking for easy money.
You move! You stay right there! You can't do 100 right now!
All right, how was everything, boys? Real good. Good? Good. Excellent. Food all right?
Gang leader Anthony Pino had his own take on the American dream. Although Pino owned a gas station, his first love was larceny.
How are you, buddy? Good to see you. Henry Baker. All right, pull up a chair, pull up a chair. Come on in.
Over the years, he built his own crew out of neighborhood toughs.
One shot, but we're going to take our time. We're going to pick our shot. I'm going to make sure every one of us is good. Look, this is the
Big Joe
score.
McGinnis owned a bar and laundered money.
All right?
Specs O'Keefe was a stick-up man, known for shaking down local bookies and their clients. Jazz Maffey, a former high school football star, ran a numbers racket.
Cut up 8 different ways.
Although they had netted some decent dough from the counting rooms, Pino wanted to go after the big money.
Money's up on the
He wanted to go after Brinks.
Going through the garage. It's unbelievable. It's almost like they're giving it to us already.
Back in the 40s, Brinks Armored Car Service was America's bank on wheels. The company moved millions of dollars through city streets every day. The Brinks cash was tempting, but most crooks considered it unattainable. Pino believed otherwise. He tailed the trucks and drivers, studying their every move. All the cash came and went from a renovated garage in the North End. Inside was enough money to change a man's life forever.
What you doing? Looks like he's sleeping.
Pino spent months casing the building.
I think we could do it in 17. They must be in a counter. They must be in a vault.
He learned how the big shipments were handled and memorized each of the cashier's responsibilities. 50 years ago, working out of the Boston office, FBI agent John Kehoe knew Pino's style.
He was a mastermind, but he was also a plugger. He was determined, and what he wanted to obtain, he would go through any kind of planning in order to obtain it.
To Pino, the key to the job was simplicity. His plan was to strike after the place was closed and clean out the vault. When the last cashier left for the night, the gang made their move. The gang easily broke into the building and reached their target, a massive vault constructed of steel encased in concrete block.
Do your stuff, huh? Okay. Let's see what we got here. Okay, it looks pretty basic here.
More riches than Pino could imagine were just a few feet away.
All right. I'm thinking we put an 8-bit
But the
right
gang
here.
had a problem.
See, the only problem with that is we got this anti-lock mechanism. Tell me we can't do this. I don't know yet. It's looking, it's good. It can be done. Okay. Come on, let's, all right. I don't think it's going to go.
Not only was the vault wired to an alarm company, The lock mechanism was more complicated than anything they had ever seen.
That would be the first place we look. That's the first thing we're going to see.
It was back to the drawing board. The gang brainstormed night after night.
I'm not getting pinched on this one. That means we not got no.
They could use nitroglycerin to destroy the vault, but it was too risky.
This is going to happen. We need to know exactly what time.
An explosion would bring the authorities running. Instead, Pino's men broke into the alarm company and stole a diagram of the Brinks alarm system. They also obtained information from the U.S. Patent Office.
They asked McGinnis to send down to Washington somebody to look over at a Washington office to see if he could come up with any information concerning the alarm system.
Hey, let me see. I know you're gonna.
But none of the patent drawings could help override the system. Pino realized there was no way of breaking into the vault without getting caught.
We're gonna clean them like fish.
They would have to take the vault when it was open, and by force.
Yeah, that's right. No, this guy got fired. He got, yeah, let him go. 10:07.
Their timing would have to be perfect.
There's been 3 gone for, I don't know, like 30, 40 minutes now.
The vault was only open for 15 minutes each night, and 6 locked doors stood in their way. Jimmying the locks would eat up valuable time.
2 guys.
But Pino had a plan.
Come on. This one here.
All right. We need some light.
Right down here.
The gang broke into the Brinks building nightly to remove the locks from each of the interior doors.
Come on. We haven't got all day. Come on. You got it?
Once keys were made, the locks were carefully replaced.
Go. All right, that's 3, huh? So why don't you show me the rest of this place? Step right this way.
Pino probably spent anywhere up from 1.5 to 2 years walking in and out of the place. It was like a full-time job with Tony, and he spent a great deal of time there.
The gang now had a complete set of keys. With free passage to the vault room, it was only a matter of time before they got their hands on all that cash. After years of planning, the Brinks robbery was set for Tuesday, January 17th, 1950. The men were dressed as Brinks drivers and wore galoshes to muffle their footsteps. Once they were inside, they had to move fast. Always thinking ahead, Pino had the men remove anything that might jingle. Around 7 p.m., lookout man Victor Costa took up his post outside the Brinks building. The rest of the gang would wait for his signal. Timing was critical. They only had a 15-minute window to clean out the vault. If they entered the building too early, they risked getting caught. But if they waited too long, the money would be locked away for the night. Finally, the plan was in motion. Using their keys, the gang worked their way through the building. They pulled on rubber masks as they neared the vault room. The cashiers were outnumbered and outgunned.
Gentlemen.
One of the guards started to reach for his weapon. And O'Keefe said to him, "Don't do it." The guard then gave up the idea of pulling the gun.
Get your hands up, turn
The size of the hall was overwhelming. As the gang hurried to empty the vault, they were startled by the sound of a door buzzer. In all their scheming, no one counted on visitors. The gang got lucky. It was just a garage attendant, unaware of the heist in progress. After they'd entered the building, the crew sped off with the cash.
Oh, Mom, Pop, what are you doing now? Hey, go back.
They took their bounty to Maffey's place.
We've got some business to talk over, have a couple of
At
drinks.
this time of night?
Oh, yeah, don't worry, we're not going to be late. You know, we'll be quiet. Go on upstairs. Go back to sleep here, okay? Go on, go on.
Because we're getting pushed up.
Oh, no. It's just that the boys are coming right in, so, you know, I don't want them disturbing you, so go on up. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. We won't be long, we won't be late.
Okay, don't make too much noise.
Okay.
His elderly parents had no idea of the riches that now filled their living room. The gang decided to dispose of the checks and traceable bills. They would stow the rest until the heat died down. Even before the money was counted, Pino's gang suspected it was the biggest haul of their lives. They'd finally made the major leagues. Meanwhile, Pino sped to McGinnis's liquor store to establish an alibi.
Happy to hear it. And your brother?
Doing fine.
Well, thanks for keeping the city safe.
Absolutely.
Just by luck, he ran into a cop.
Absolutely.
How are you?
Doing dynamite.
How's your mom doing?
She's doing better.
Yes?
Doing better.
Pino hoped the officer would remember he was nowhere near the robbery.
I'll do that.
Make sure it's off duty.
Absolutely, guys.
On the other side of town, the head cashier called police with stunning news.
Operator, get the police.
Brinks had been robbed.
Yeah.
Cops and reporters flocked to the scene of the crime. By the time the FBI got there, the vault room was in chaos.
FBI, we're taking charge.
Federal agent Leonard Frizzoli was assigned to the investigation.
We got there and things were pretty much in a turmoil there. There were reporters already there walking all over the place and quite a few people there. And so what we had to do is try to preserve the crime scene.
But there wasn't much to preserve. The only physical evidence, the rope and tape the robbers had used to tie up the cashiers, proved too common to trace.
Blue, navy blue peacoats came through with mask and hats on and took the guard through.
Eddie Corsetti was a police reporter.
I wish I had chewing gum on my shoes when I was walking around that office because, there had to be, a wild guess, there had to be $100,000 laying around on the floor.
Need you to come on in.
Through all the mess, the FBI saw a meticulously planned caper, an enormous heist that smelled like an inside job.
Don't you already know we were tied up here?
But polygraph tests would quickly clear the Brinks employees of any suspicion. The investigators had nothing. The Brinks robbery became an overnight sensation. Newspapers described how the wily gang held up an impenetrable vault like a candy store. To 1950s America, it was the crime of the century. The robbers had walked away with a whopping $1.5 million in cash.
An incredible crime in Boston. The $1.5 million holdup of an armored car service by 9 bandits, one of the nation's few multi-million-dollar stick-ups. Before scooping up the cash, they bound and gagged the 5 employees present. One of them, James R. Allen, tells the rest of the story.
They kept another trip, another trip. I kept saying, Sergeant, when is it going to be over?
Brinks wanted the men caught and punished. Without any clues, they offered an astronomical reward.
They came out with this offer of $100,000. Not wanted dead or alive, wanted dead.
But the public didn't share that sentiment.
We conducted a poll, the newspaper did. I don't know, I think they contacted something like 500 people. And I think 75% were hoping they'd get away with it.
With so little evidence to go on, the police and the FBI knew that the crime of the century might never be solved. FBI agents were becoming frustrated. Under the glare of the media, they were no closer to solving the Brinks robbery. Little useful evidence was found at the crime scene, and since the robbers had worn masks, nobody could identify the culprits either. Besides the cashiers, the only other witnesses were a couple of teenagers who'd seen the getaway vehicle. But all they could offer was a vague description of the truck. Without a license plate number, it would be almost impossible to find.
We looked up and there was a truck.
And you said about 10 to 15 miles an hour. Is there anything else now that you can think about?
FBI agent John Larkin worked the case.
Regardless of what the suspicions were and how accurate they might have been, unless somebody cooperated in the long run, this was not going to be solved.
Desperate for answers, agents grilled every crook in town.
And that's all I know. That's all I know. Honest to God.
Before long, Boston's Underworld soon wanted the Brinks crew arrested as much as the cops did.
You know, he's the one you really want to check out. Follow Pino.
A couple of informants actually fingered Pino. It was hard for the cops to believe that a two-bit hood like Tony Pino could have pulled off a heist this huge.
Oh, good. How about you?
Well, we've been okay, but, you know, we're still trying to get some information here.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we're hoping you can help us.
Besides, a fellow police officer had already confirmed Pino's alibi.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, 123.
The rest of the gang had alibis as well. But since they involved friends and family, there was no way to either prove or disprove them. Still, it was hard to believe that the crime of the century could have been pulled off by this band of second-rate crooks.
They were all well known by the Boston police. They all had records. but on a small time scale. Nothing. No one would ever dream that that crowd could pull off a robbery of $1.5 million. No one.
What kind of stuff?
2 months passed before police found a single lead. Several pieces of a burned truck turned up at a city dump.
Why would somebody do that?
Further investigation revealed that 2 of Pino's associates lived near that same dump. The police began to wonder if they had been too hasty. Maybe Pino's gang had been involved after all. They checked out the serial numbers on the truck parts. The numbers matched the model of the getaway vehicle seen speeding away from Brinks. The FBI set up round-the-clock surveillance on the gang. But once again, they had underestimated Tony Pino. The gang leader ordered his men to limit their time together. If they needed to communicate, they'd stop by Pino's gas station to deliver messages. The FBI now believed Pino's gang had something to hide, but they didn't have the evidence to prove it. 2 years after the heist, a grand jury convened and called Pino and his gang as witnesses. The results were disappointing.
The hope was that some of them might see the light and cooperate, but they all took the Fifth Amendment. That was about it.
The grand jury failed to produce a single indictment. Pino's patience paid off. On January 17, 1953, the federal statute of limitations expired. It was starting to look as if he had devised the perfect crime. Still, the government refused to give up. They still had 3 years pending on the state charges. The FBI increased the pressure. They committed unlimited money and man-hours to catching the robbers in whatever way they could. Deportation proceedings were initiated against Pino. Gang members were charged with tax evasion and bootlegging.
Boys, come on.
Tension mounted as the men found themselves in expensive legal battles. The gang started to crumble. O'Keefe accused Pino of cheating him out of his share of the money and made threats to the men if he didn't get his due. Pino decided to beat him to the punch. Ironically, O'Keefe would land in jail for breaking his parole. Nearly 6 years after the heist, and just 11 days before the Massachusetts statute of limitations would run out, O'Keefe was ready to make a deal. In exchange for a light sentence, Specs O'Keefe confessed to the robbery and fingered the other members of the gang. In June of 1956, a tip led investigators to the only money that would ever be recovered from the Brinks heist. It was a disappointing victory. After spending 6 years and $29 million on the investigation, they recovered a measly $51,000. By the time the trial began on August 6, 1956, 2 of the gang members had already died of natural causes. With the exception of O'Keefe, the other robbers all received life sentences, but were paroled in the 60s and 70s.
I got something with me.
By their own accounts, the amount of money they actually saw wasn't worth it. Drinking, gambling, and legal debts quickly ate up their fortune. While rich in the memories of their celebrated caper, Boston's most famous robbers spent the rest of their lives flat broke.
How much money you think is up? Let's go, down!
Canada's most famous gang of robbers set their sights south of the border.
90 seconds!
They take millions from U.S. banks and lead police on a chase that lasts 10 long years. On the night of November 15th, 1979, a guard at Canada's Joyceville Penitentiary in Ontario made a startling discovery. Patrick Mitchell, a convicted thief, had collapsed.
Problem in cell block 3.
He was sweating profusely and short of breath.
Something's wrong with him.
The prison nurse recognized that Mitchell was in trouble.
This pulse is racing.
This was no inmate scam to get out of a work detail. The man's pulse was racing, and he was barely coherent.
Respond to cell block 3 right away.
It looked like a heart attack.
First number. Is that good or bad? Better than it was.
But Mitchell would never make it to the emergency room. At the hospital, the ambulance was greeted not by doctors, but by gunmen.
Hands up! Don't move! Don't move! Get the stretcher out of the way!
Let's get over there. He's not doing well.
Within seconds, they vanished into the darkness.
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Mitchell's escape plan worked flawlessly.
Come on, we gotta get there.
Thanks to the help of his longtime friends and accomplices, Stephen Reed and Lionel Wright. Earlier that evening, Mitchell dissolved a pack of cigarettes in water and drank the toxic brew. He knew the massive dose of nicotine would shock his system and mimic the symptoms of a heart attack.
Stay with it. Stay with it. Pull him out. Pull him out.
Reed and Wright had been eager to free the leader of their gang. Now they feared he might not survive the stunt. Paddy Mitchell and his accomplices were Canada's most notorious bank robbers. The trio had been convicted of stealing $165,000 worth of gold bullion from the Ottawa International Airport. It was one of the biggest heists in Canadian history. Now Mitchell would also be known as the mastermind behind one of the most daring prison breaks ever attempted.
People are going to be on the side.
An escape that wouldn't have been possible without the help of his friends.
No.
The three men had been stealing for years. They joined forces in the early 1970s.
Patty, what do you think?
Stephen Reed was a high school dropout and petty criminal. Lionel Wright worked as a bookkeeper by day and a thief by night.
He came in from over here, right? And he took a walk around the back.
The men were relieved when Mitchell did in fact recover. Once he was feeling up to it, they wasted no time planning their next move. They knew it was too risky to stay in Ottawa. The three men headed to San Diego, California. For Paddy, San Diego was like a dream come true. The weather was perfect and the banks were plentiful. Paddy and his boys liked to live life in the fast lane. They just needed a little cash to finance their fun.
Paddy thought that he died and gone to heaven when he went to the United States and saw the land of riches, so many banks, as he says, such nice money.
Mitchell was determined to get his hands on some of that nice money. Over the next several weeks, the men cased several banks. They were looking for a building with light security and back alleys for a quick getaway. A small credit union in San Diego seemed to fit the bill. The gang opened accounts so they could check out the bank's physical layout and personnel procedures. All the while, they took note of guard stations and peak business hours.
Okay, well listen, sir, thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much.
I want to come in this way.
The men took great
around
care
here,
in planning their
this
crime.
alleyway and park. That's what I want to
Each man made his contribution.
This is the interstate that we want.
Lionel Wright's bookish ways were put to good use researching the bank's operations. Mitchell and Reed mapped out escape routes. They talked through every aspect of the heist.
I don't disagree with that.
Over to here.
Once inside, they would each have a specific task.
Whoa, we didn't decide.
Wright would man the getaway car out front. Reed would watch the customers, and Mitchell would grab the cash. It all had to happen fast.
Well, most bandits are not real sophisticated. We have thousands of robberies each year, and most of them are not really sophisticated in the way they go about their business. However, these guys were different.
They were bold, meticulous, and above all, patient. The gang spent weeks refining their plan.
Let's go, let's go! Down, down!
In February of 1980, they hit their first target, a large credit union in San Diego.
Get down! Hurry it up!
Although the gang carried guns, Mitchell never intended to use them. If they moved fast enough, they would be long gone before the police even arrived.
Throw the bag! Bag! Come on! Let's go, let's go!
Just to be sure, they carried a stopwatch.
90 seconds! Throw me the bag! Right now!
The robbers left the bank after exactly 90 seconds. They took only the money they could grab in that amount of time. No longer, no exceptions.
They were in the bank only a certain amount of time, and then they weren't too greedy in that when the end of that time came, they were gone.
Still pumped with adrenaline, the men counted the take from their first U.S. heist. The cash totaled over $20,000. In a mere 90 seconds, they had been able to steal nearly 1/4 of their biggest job in Canada.
I knew that one was going to be. Oh, yeah, you knew. You didn't have it all.
Life in America was looking better all the time. The gang was eager for more. They made plans to rob banks all over San Diego.
Guarding too.
They began wearing outlandish Halloween masks to distract witnesses from noticing more pertinent details like height, weight, or hair color.
Do it.
And they always carried a stopwatch. In their first 2 months in San Diego, they hit 4 banks for a total of $70,000. The press named them the Stopwatch Gang. For Patty Mitchell, the U.S. was indeed the land of opportunity. By the end of the year, holdups in San Diego County had doubled. Police were baffled. Following another robbery, the FBI was called in to search for clues.
Well, we got 3 men come in and see any car?
Mitchell left them none. Witnesses could only recall the details of the robbers' weird masks.
One was like a skeleton.
As the law struggled to find the mysterious Stopwatch Gang, its members enjoyed the good life. They treated themselves and friends to designer clothes, flashy jewelry, trips to Vegas, and big nights on the town. With each passing month, the gang grew richer and more confident. The FBI simply grew more frustrated. By late summer 1980, Paddy Mitchell's Canadian bandits were becoming too well known. Or so he feared. He needed one last score. A heist so big, he and his men could lay low in luxury for years. But he knew he would have to be patient.
He was a consummate planner. He would case a joint if it took a month, 2 months, 3 months. He would follow the Brinks trucks around, the Wells Fargo trucks. He'd get their schedule down pat. He would know exactly to the second, to the minute, when they would be arriving at the bank.
Got him on time.
Mitchell noticed that armored trucks made cash pickups and deliveries to the Bank of America every Tuesday morning.
Plus, look at...
The schedule never varied. The trucks arrived like clockwork at exactly 10:30 a.m.
You know that we're pretending.
This was the shot he had been waiting for. There was just one problem.
It's just the layout.
The trucks were manned by 2 armed guards. If they jumped the guard on the street, his partner in the truck might start shooting. Mitchell preferred to catch the guard alone in the bank as he exited the vault. That meant the gang would have to wait for him inside.
All right, we got the schedule. All right, what are we doing?
For this heist, Halloween masks were out.
What's the mirror?
Instead, Wright found library books on how to apply wigs and theatrical makeup.
All right, to look at yourself while you're putting on the makeup.
Meanwhile, Mitchell and Reed scrutinized pickup times at dumpsters around the city.
All right, listen, this isn't gonna work.
They would have to dump their disguises as quickly as possible after the heist. On September 23, 1980, Stephen Reed and Lionel Wright entered the Bank of America, wearing their new disguises. Paddy Mitchell waited in the getaway car outside. Mitchell suspected the bank customers would be so busy going about their own business that they wouldn't even notice the strange beards his men were wearing. He was right. Suddenly, the stopwatch gang sprang into action. Wright and Reed quickly disarmed the guard and went to work. They were finished in 90 seconds. The gang escaped without being followed. According to plan, they gathered up the tools of their trade: a stolen license plate, bank bags, disguises, and stashed them in a dumpster.
Go.
Then they left town, heading towards Arizona. Paddy Mitchell had gotten his big score. It was the largest armed robbery in San Diego history. As usual, bank employees remembered little about the gunmen, beyond their peculiar beards and wigs. The FBI had nothing to work with. At first. In all his meticulous planning, there was one thing Paddy Mitchell hadn't thought of. The regularly scheduled pickup at the dumpster was delayed. A man scavenging for bottles discovered 3 cloth bags with shipping tags from the Bank of America. A search of the dumpster turned up the wigs, makeup, and clothing used in the robbery. FBI technicians matched fingerprints on the gear to 2 escaped Canadian convicts, Patrick Mitchell and Stephen Reed. Agents learned that Mitchell Reed and another Canadian, Lionel Wright, had worked together in the past.
Take a look at what we got over here.
They compared their mugshots with photos from bank security cameras. The suspects resembled the disguised gunmen. FBI agents felt sure they had finally identified the stopwatch gang.
How they compare to this one.
But they still had to find them.
Listen, I'm special agent.
Authorities traced the gang's getaway car to a rental agency, where they discovered the vehicle had been rented by one of the robbers. DMV records led them to Oak Creek, Arizona. The crew had taken up residence in a luxurious home in Oak Creek. Their wealth and generosity had already made them many friends in the community. They were enjoying themselves so much, they were unaware they were being watched.
Okay, California.
They were known as being big spenders, and when they went out for dinner with folks, they always treated. They were passing out $20 bills on a regular basis, and certainly why not? It's not theirs. And so they were living the good life up there.
In the early morning hours of October 31st, 1980, Stephen Reed was pulled over on what he thought was a routine traffic violation. For the sleepy town of Oak Creek, it was anything but routine.
Secure.
Officials raided the hideout, where they captured Wright.
Stay down, partner. Stay down.
But the leader of the stopwatch gang had escaped again.
Do you understand those rights?
We had to actually start from ground zero again and start contacting people, sources, informants, things of this nature. And just hit the streets again trying to find the guy and you know, put it out across the country as to what his MO is, and start looking for similar MOs to see if we can pinpoint a location where he might be at.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Patty Mitchell had been away with a girlfriend the day of the raid. On hearing of his buddy's capture, he shaved his mustache, took his money from a safety deposit box, and hit the road. Patty Mitchell lived on the run for 7 long years. He always managed to stay one step ahead of the FBI. He continued to rob banks, always getting in and out in under 2 minutes. He never once fired his gun.
He was good at what he did. He never hurt anybody. Patty never fired a shot in anger. He was a gentleman bandit.
He'd also become a master of disguise. He grew beards, dyed his hair, wore wigs. Police never knew who they were looking for. His crime spree elevated him to the FBI's 10 most wanted list. One of his many faces was featured on a television crime show.
The FBI needs your help to capture one of the craftiest bank robbers in North America.
The show was flooded with tips that led police to the Philippines.
That was the first real concrete information that we had had on the whereabouts of Patty Mitchell in probably 4 years.
In the Philippines, the bank robbing playboy had actually settled down. He'd married a local woman and started a family. Agents raided Mitchell's home. But once again, he was long gone by the time they arrived.
To have had this opportunity and to have let it slip away again after so many years of hard work, and finding him again as far away as the Philippines was something that was not very pleasant to go through. But we had to pick it up again and start looking for him again. And we knew that he would probably come back to the United States. We just didn't know when or where.
Unbeknownst to authorities, Patty Mitchell had quietly slipped into the small town of South Haven, Mississippi on February 21st, 1994. It didn't stay quiet for long.
South Haven Police.
At around 10 a.m., the South Haven police received a disturbing call. A bomb had been placed at City Hall.
Unit 311.
Respond, 8791 Highway 51 to South Haven City Hall. Have a bomb threat called into that location.
Step on the radio? Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
The call seemed suspicious to Police Chief Tom Long.
Okay, bomb threat. That means usually for us some type of diversion. What is the other end of this? So we're talking, okay, let's all watch our financial institutions.
But he quickly did the math. South Haven had 13 banks and limited resources. He sent 2 officers to check out the bomb threat.
Yes, sir. Okay, well, hustle out.
He ordered the rest of his small staff to cover as many of the banks as they could. Narcotics, homicide, and patrol officers all hit the street. On their way to cover the Deposit Guarantee National Bank, officers got a call that a robbery was in progress. Chief Long's hunch was right. His men were already in the vicinity. They reached the bank in less than 90 seconds. Over the years, the leader of the infamous stopwatch gang had stolen millions of dollars in cities all over the world. But his adventure would end on the hot pavement of a small town in Mississippi.
One of the agents, FBI agents, stepped in my office and was just beaming, you know, said, "This is Patrick Mitchell. We have been looking for this guy for 10 years. He's been on the most wanted list."
For Patty Mitchell, the clock had finally run out.
Your pockets.
I think Mitchell played on, number one, the 90-second response, and that is, if you can get in and out in 90 seconds and have you some good avenues of exit, then the odds are you'll probably be successful a few times. But you're only delaying the inevitable. You are going to get caught sooner or later.
In 1994, Patrick Michael Mitchell was found guilty of bank robbery and possession of a handgun. He was sentenced to 30 years in a federal prison.
Side, please.
He also owed Canada another 18 years for the gold bullion heist back in 1974. Stopwatch accomplice Lionel Wright served his time and was paroled. Stephen Reed also served his time and was paroled. He was sentenced to 18 years for another robbery in Canada in 1999.
Let's go! Down, right now!
During the course of his career, Patty Mitchell spent less than 90 minutes robbing millions from banks. For those 90 minutes, he will spend the next 50 years of his life behind bars. He is scheduled to be released in the year 2043 at the age of 99. Police officers and criminals inhabit the same dark world of scams and schemes. But what happens when the line blurs between the cops and the robbers? Medford, Massachusetts was a quaint bedroom community outside Boston. Medford was a quiet town, immune from big city crime. But one night in 1960, that small town silence was shattered by gunfire.
1054.
Jerry Clementi and his partner rushed to the scene of an armed robbery at a local liquor store. Although he was still a rookie, Clementi was determined not to let the robbers get away.
Open the door slowly. Hands out. Both. Both hands out. Get down. Spread them
He
arms.
risked his own life to protect his partner and bring the thieves to justice.
Got him secured.
The mayor of Medford awarded Clementi the coveted Medal of Honor. As a hometown hero, his career advanced quickly. Officer Dan Gately worked with Clementi.
He had a lot of people that he knew and he was friendly with. And he was a well-liked person. A lot of guys liked him. But then again, they didn't know him.
Can I get you anything else?
To know him was to know that he liked the perks that came along with being a cop.
Yep, that's for me. Yep. Take a look at that.
After several years on the force, he began to bend the rules.
Wow. Quantum Pro 1404. Thanks. A lot more stuff. Well, that can see. Hey, I appreciate it. A little something.
Whenever Clementi and his fellow cops investigated a store robbery, they helped themselves to the merchandise.
Oh, she always has seafood. How's Lewis? Or Lewis?
Exploiting a corrupt network of cops,
Hey, Ed, what's up?
Clementi used his influence and power to get what he wanted at a very young age. He rose quickly through the ranks.
Clementi is a captain. When the captain came on the scene, it was quite a thing because you have a captain out there with you. They looked up to him. So if he said to do this or do that, they'd try to do him a favor in a minute.
The favor Clementi most appreciated was to be let in on a scam.
You guys up to? Place I was talking to you about. What do you think, Jerry?
In late 1979, Sergeant Joe Bangs brought up the idea of burglarizing a television store.
Figure maybe about $10,000.
But to Clementi, the heist was too small to justify the risk. Boston Globe reporter Paul Langner.
Jerry Clementi must be given credit for a vision. He said, my God, if you're going to do that kind of high-tech bypassing of a burglar alarm, let's not bother with the dinky television store. Let's go for something really big.
Clementi had his eye on the Depositors Trust Company, a small-town bank with a vault full of safe deposit boxes. As far as Clementi was concerned, there was but one obstacle standing between him and untold wealth. A 12-inch thick metal door.
They were very bold and arrogant. They've been getting away with a lot of things for a long time. And, they just had the feeling that they couldn't be caught.
As cops, Clementi and Bangs knew every crook in town.
Just you have everything together? Working on it. Just going to make plans.
Along with fellow officer Tom Doherty, they recruited two of the best safecrackers in the business. The men thought the vault door was impossible to crack. Clementi was determined to find another way in.
We're lucky if we profit 10 grand each. For what?
The gang learned everything they could about the layout of the vault. Posing as a customer, Doherty measured the room and noted every detail. Clementi wanted to move fast. He brought on another experienced safecracker.
Taking care of the explosion.
The gang was now made up of 3 cops and 3 robbers. Since breaking through the vault door was impossible, they needed an alternate point of entry.
Once they're closed.
Blueprints revealed they could gain access to the ceiling of the vault via the optical shop next door. The ceiling was constructed of reinforced concrete and was 2 feet thick. The plan was ambitious and risky, but Clementi figured it was worth it.
Hey.
Clementi chose the Memorial Day weekend for the heist. The bank would be closed for 3 days, giving them plenty of time to stash the loot before the robbery was even discovered. A consummate planner, Clementi set up his alibi beforehand. He assigned himself to work overtime at the town carnival. That way, he could work a few hours and slip away unnoticed. On Saturday night, Clementi set his plan in motion. As a police officer, he knew the optical shop was not protected by an alarm. After midnight on Sunday morning, Clementi led his men in the back door. If everything went according to plan, they would be rich men in 3 short hours. While Clementi was playing robber, his friend Doherty was playing cop. From his position outside the bank, he could monitor his police radio to warn the gang in case they were detected.
Doherty was actually the shift commander in Medford on the night of the burglary. And he had directed patrols to other ends of the city and away from Medford Square and away from the Depositors Trust Bank.
They headed for the loft of the optical shop. From here, they could drill directly into the ceiling of the vault. Outside, Doherty couldn't hear the drilling. In under an hour, they were through the first wall. Then, Clementi heard voices. The men froze, fearing the worst. Just as Clementi and his gang were about to break through the ceiling of the vault, they heard voices. Concerned, Doherty went to investigate. He found the owners of the ice cream parlor on the other side of the bank. The couple were doing inventory.
Break into the area. Probably be a good idea to go ahead and pack it up for the evening. Okay.
Lieutenant Doherty told them to leave. There had been break-ins in the area, and it wasn't safe.
Okay, good night, folks. Okay, everything's good.
Once they were gone, he radioed the gang to resume work. But once again, the plan faltered. Their tools hadn't even dented the vault ceiling. They would have to resort to something more powerful. Clementi radioed Doherty there was going to be an explosion. He knew that was sure to draw attention. They had to risk it.
The First time it didn't go through, so they put in a stronger stick, a full stick, I guess. And this time it went through, and the 2 blasts failed to generate a single call to the Medford police station.
Now nothing stood between them and all the money they'd ever dreamed of.
Come on, we'll make it. Come on. Okay.
The men systematically raided the vault. But they had lost precious time. After only an hour inside the vault, Clementi told his men it was time to go. They had to leave the bank before dawn to avoid being seen.
Let's get it going. Get the tools together.
The robbers slipped out the back of the optical shop as silently as they had entered. In one night's work, they had taken over $300,000.
Amazing. I guess
It was more money than the men had seen in nearly 15 years of petty thefts. But they realized they had left so much behind. They had cracked only a fraction of the 1,000 safety deposit boxes.
be careful with these things here.
Let's go, guys. Let's get this.
They decided to go back for more. On Sunday, the men made sure they were seen around town.
That's why I told you I don't want him out all the time.
They were careful not to stray from their routines.
Maybe we can, who knows,
Until it was time to spring into action. It was after midnight when the gang went back to the bank a second time. Fueled by their greed, they worked with assembly line efficiency. Again, they ran out of time. Before they knew it, dawn was breaking, and it was time to go. Although they had only cracked half the boxes, the heist was enormous. And still, it was not enough. They had to make one last trip before the bank opened on Tuesday morning. After 3 nights of work, they were all rich men. The men divided up the cash.
We did all right.
Bangs would fence the jewelry once the heat died down. On May 27, 1980, the employees at the Depositors Trust Company returned to work. They were in for the surprise of their lives. Soon, the bank was swarming with detectives. Ironically, Thomas Doherty was one of the officers who worked the scene. The sheer volume of the heist made police suspect that the thieves had been inside the bank for several days. door, the owner of the optical shop led investigators to the gaping hole he had discovered.
We knew that it happened over the Memorial Day weekend, but we didn't know whether it was 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, etc. There was a lot of work to be done. You know, there were a lot more people to talk to.
The FBI questioned anyone who might have seen anything.
Did you notice anything outside the windows?
The couple from the ice cream parlor told the agents about the police officer who warned them to leave their shop. Unfortunately, they could not recall the officer's name. Investigators checked the weekend patrol schedule at the Medford police station.
There was one other, the new guy that came in. He rode with us that night.
There was no record of the encounter.
We met in the police academy.
At 9 a.m., the bank failed to open. Crowds gathered outside. Anxious customers were told to return the next day to be interviewed by police. Investigators had no idea how much had been taken. They would first have to obtain inventories from the box holders. At the bank, hundreds of anxious customers lined up to describe their losses to police. They learned they would never recover what had been taken. The bank did not insure the contents of safe deposit boxes. The estimates of the heist soared as pressure grew to solve the crime. Police felt helpless.
Well, it was certainly frustrating for us as police officers, as investigators, because we weren't getting anywhere. We had no physical evidence at the time of the crime of depositor's trust.
Okay, let's take all this.
Investigators desperately needed a breakthrough in what was beginning to look like the perfect crime.
Okay.
In the days following the depositor's trust robbery, authorities realized they were dealing with the biggest theft in Massachusetts history. Clementi and his gang stayed cool. The cops went back to being police officers, and the robbers laid low.
They came right down through the vault.
Clementi stayed with the force, and Tommy Doherty stayed with the Medford force. They did something which was clever in that they agreed not to be too ostentatious about their spending.
Clementi put a down payment on a modest timeshare condo, and other gang members began spending their share of the loot a little bit at a time.
Okay, so you'll get...
But it was too late. They had already attracted attention. A week after the heist, an anonymous tip cast suspicion on Jerry Clementi and Thomas Doherty.
I think it was Clemente. I know Clemente was...
Investigators were stunned. If they couldn't trust two veteran police officers, they couldn't trust anyone on the force.
We kept it right to a small few in our own office, a very small few in the Medford Police Department. And that was it. I mean, we operated cloak and dagger. I mean, we were very, very secretive about everything.
Despite Clementi's distinguished police record, investigators paid him a visit.
What's up? I want to ask you a few
He told them he knew nothing about the break-in and named several police officers who provided him with alibis. Police then questioned Thomas Doherty. He told them they would need a warrant to enter his house.
No problem.
Although they were suspicious of Clementi and Doherty, they had no evidence to hand the DA. the case went cold.
Take a look at these, will you, please? Thank you. Yeah.
It was becoming clear if they were ever going to solve this crime, they would have to use a different approach.
The investigation itself was not going anywhere fast, and we needed a break. We knew we needed a break, and over the next couple of years that followed, we tried to force that break by following people, putting pressure on people, that type of thing.
Yeah, maybe you want to go to prison too, right?
Clemente tried to keep his gang together, but 4 years of police pressure took its toll. Doherty and Bangs began using and then dealing drugs. Before long, they were bitter enemies. Finally, investigators got the break they had been waiting for. Sergeant Joseph Bangs was ambushed and shot in a garage. He was rushed to a local hospital. As police investigated the incident, they searched his house and car. They found a briefcase full of jewelry and $10,000 in Canadian cash.
Kill your mother for that. Wonder who that belongs to.
Police suspected the attempt on Bang's life was tied to the depositor's trust heist.
Yep. I think we ought to go ahead and arrest this guy now.
When Bangs recovered, he named his shooter. Lieutenant Thomas Doherty was arrested and charged with attempted murder.
Next door.
At Doherty's trial, Bangs blew the case wide open.
Allowed us in. Broke into the alarm system. Disarmed the alarm system. And Clemente let us
Prosecutors asked where he'd gotten the jewelry.
set the fuse. Your Honor, at the time, it goes back a lot further than that.
Bangs responded that it was part of the depositor's trust heist. In exchange for immunity, Bangs agreed to give investigators all the details they needed.
That's right. 3 of us.
Captain Jerry Clemente received 30 to 40 years in prison for his part in the theft. He was paroled in 2000. Lieutenant Thomas Doherty got 18 to 20 and is still serving time. The rest of the gang got 10 to 15 for their part in the robbery.
But when a police officer's out there acting as a criminal, we don't have any tolerance for that. These were guys that were criminals masquerading as cops.
Joseph Bangs entered the witness protection program and now lives under an assumed identity. An Italian playboy commits the world's largest armed robbery, triggering a world-class game of cat and mouse. For many young men, vandalism is a rite of passage. But Valerio Vici was an overachiever. On January 6, 1972, at age 17, he began his criminal career with a bang when he helped blow up a television tower. Vici had no use for subtlety, and the fireworks would follow him the rest of his life. In his northern Italian hometown of Ascoli Piceno, Vici was considered just another good kid gone bad. But nobody knew just how bad.
Sì, signore, scusi,
Dove è Valerio? Valerio? È qui. Valerio sta qui. E stai.
Vici came from an educated middle-class home.
Valerio, Valerio!
His father and brother were lawyers. His mother ran a boutique. They resigned themselves to the fact that Valerio was the black sheep. Incorrigible, spoiled, and thanks to his rebellious streak, under arrest.
Come l'hai fatto?
For the young Vici, prison was a learning experience.
Era semplice.
The thieves and con men had much to share.
Sabotà?
E mezza mezza.
And Vici was an apt pupil. The subject he enjoyed the most, he would study for the rest of his life.
Era felice.
How to steal other people's money. Upon his release, Vici began robbing post offices in nearby villages. His notoriety grew. According to Detective James Goldie, Vici's charm and daring quickly made him a celebrity.
He would walk in, and instead of pointing the gun, he would hold up one of his newspaper clippings. And the lady behind the counter would say, "Ah, the bandito," and hand over all the money.
But fame has its downside. Vici soon found himself back in jail. He wasted no time resuming his studies. He was an accomplished criminal by the time he reached his late 20s. In the small town where he lived, he found himself on the law's short list of suspects whenever a robbery was committed. The relentless police pressure began to cramp his style.
Buongiorno. Ciao.
Valerio.
Vici realized that the Italian authorities wouldn't let up until they nailed him. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, he packed up and fled the country. He first went to Switzerland to open a bank account and throw police off his trail. Using fake passports, he eventually settled in London, where he had some friends. At first, he didn't know enough English to order a cup of coffee, but he was intelligent. He studied and learned fast. Soon he was back in business, according to reporter James Nicholson.
He stayed low for a while, not very long though. He was back, he'd seen our banks, he'd seen what was happening, and he thought, I would need money, and he started robbing our banks that very year he came here.
The Italian bandit robbed 5 British banks in a matter of months. He moved in and out so quickly, nobody could identify him. And unlike his native Italy, British security guards weren't armed.
Oh, look at this.
Vici was quickly becoming a rich man. Valerio Vici believed that banks were only good for withdrawing other people's money. For his own wealth, he required something more secure. He kept his stolen assets in a private deposit box near his apartment. Meanwhile, Vici lived the good life in luxurious St. John's Wood. When he wasn't stealing, he passed himself off as an Italian journalist trying to learn English. People naturally assumed he'd come from a wealthy family. Despite his own growing fortune, Vici envied the easy wealth of his rich acquaintances. Always on the lookout for a big score, he was intrigued to learn that his friends kept their valuables in the largest deposit center in London. To Vici, the Knightsbridge Deposit Center brimmed with treasure and opportunity. Located in one of London's most prestigious neighborhoods, the vault featured state-of-the-art security. Vici's surveillance revealed automated locks, 2-foot-thick walls, bulletproof glass, and video surveillance. He realized this was no job for a bandit, even one as remarkable as himself. No, to hit Knightsbridge, he'd have to alter his MO. Posing as a successful businessman, Vici began making regular deposits. He played the part perfectly and refined his scheme with every visit. This promised to be the biggest heist of Vici's career. To pull it off required a subtle plan, a deft touch, and some inside information. Vici studied everything he could about the deposit center. He noted who came in and who went out, and at what time. He befriended the owner, Parvez Latif, to find weaknesses in his operation. But Latif's girlfriend proved to be even more useful. In order to rob the Knightsbridge Deposit Center, Vici first stole Latif's girlfriend. She revealed that Latif was in financial trouble and had an expensive drug habit.
Anybody was going for this smooth-talking Valerio, and she more or less fell for him.
With the information Vici gathered, he formulated his plan. Stealing millions of dollars required millions of details. He'd need tools to break into the boxes and a safe house to store all the loot. And he'd have to be out by 5:30 p.m. when the security chief arrived. To get in and out in time, he would need help. Vici recruited a gang. Since he wanted most of the money and all of the glory, he hired small-time crooks. He'd be the brains, they'd provide the brawn. They'd work cheap, and the police would never suspect them. With the men and the details in place, all Vici had to do was find the perfect time to set in motion the biggest and most dangerous heist of his career. The time had come for Valerio Vici to risk everything for the biggest heist of his life.
Let us through, please. Let us through.
On July 12, 1987, Vici took one of his accomplices to the deposit center and introduced him to Latif as a prospective client.
everything on this side.
Latif was only too happy to provide a tour of the elaborate facilities. The three men entered a private viewing room inside the vault. The one place the security cameras couldn't reach.
But I have just one problem. My cases are empty, and I need you to listen to me very good, okay? First thing, I don't want to hurt.
Latif asked the guard to show his guests the security features of the depository. As soon as the men were in the security booth, Vici captured the guard.
Taking your gun. All right. We go into the other room. I chain you to the post. Let's go. Nose against the wall. Vici, nose against the wall.
But one more remained. Vici and his accomplice forced Latif to call the front desk and asked the guard to bring some brochures to his office.
Get down! Get down on your knees! Face down on the floor. Now, go! Don't you look. Don't look. Let's go.
Now no one stood between the robbers and their goal.
Sticking your face against the wall. Ciao, boys.
Vici radioed to his men,
Gino!
but there was no response.
Gino! What are you doing, huh? You stay here with him.
Vici had no choice but to leave the building to retrieve them. They were right where they should have been. Their walkie-talkie was simply tuned to the wrong frequency.
Channel 9.
The error cost them precious time.
Because of the breakdown in communications, when he had to physically go out and come back in again, he was then working against the clock because there was a physical security check done around about 5:30.
It was after 4 o'clock. Vici and his gang went right to work. They had little over an hour to crack hundreds of boxes.
They were 20 minutes behind schedule, so they were banging away at these boxes with sledgehammers. Meanwhile, all the guards, including Latif, are handcuffed and away from it all. And it was like a 20th century Aladdin's cave for them. Gold, silver coming out, and pound notes and dollars galore.
Time was up. Although the men had opened only 120 of the nearly 5,000 security boxes, they needed to get out of there. In his haste, Vici cut himself. He had to keep moving. A crucial detail remained. Before Latif joined the chained-up guards, Vici gave him a wad of cash. The clever burglar had duped everyone. Even Vici's own gang didn't know that Latif was the inside man. Minutes before the security chief arrived, the gang disguised themselves and loaded the goods into a nondescript van. By the time the Knightsbridge security advisor arrived at 5:30, the gang was long gone.
What happened? You walked into the main...
Latif played his part perfectly. He had scheduled new guards who wouldn't recognize Vici. Neither of them could describe the robbers' faces. Latif also made sure a technical glitch rendered the security cameras useless.
Stuck it right to your head, is it?
Police were astounded by the scope of the crime. Detective James Goldie was at the scene.
Every time a detective walks into a situation similar to this, albeit that this was a very unique situation, I felt personally that there had to be an inside connection for this robbery to have taken place. The problem we had, of course, was who was the inside contact.
And how much had been taken. Only the box holders really knew. If the remaining cash and gems were any indication, the robbers had made off with millions. The evidence was scant, a single bloody fingerprint. Investigators knew they had to work fast, or the money was as good as gone. What they didn't know was that Valerio Vici had already fled the country. News of the Knightsbridge heist spread quickly. Distraught box holders lined up outside the deposit center to help police estimate how much was lost. James Nicholson covered the story.
It was a big robbery at a place which is in the middle of Kensington, adjacent to Knightsbridge. And this is where the rich, the famous aristocrats, members of the royal family live, and use this particular safe deposit box. And we knew immediately it happened. I got a call, would I cover it? And I went there to cover it. And I saw people queuing outside, some in tears, who had lost all their belongings.
Estimates kept climbing. £5 million, 20 million, 40 million pounds or more. Among the lost treasures was the 42-carat flick diamond, owned by the family who controls Mercedes-Benz, worth 1.5 million pounds. A true figure of the losses was difficult to gauge, but it was the biggest armed robbery of all time. As Scotland Yard investigated the heist, they became convinced the robbers had inside help. Police ran the sole fingerprint through the files of criminals in the United Kingdom. There was no match. When they sent it to Interpol, they got a hit on an Italian criminal named Valerio Vici. As British detectives learned more about Vici's reputation as a playboy, they began to theorize that the inside man at Knightsbridge might be a woman.
There were several young girls who worked in the safe deposit center. Once we had established the identity of Valerio Vici and his bona fides, the glamour boy with the fast car, the drugs, and the playboy lifestyle, of course, it looked, there was a possibility that any one of three girls could have been seduced by Vici.
While the police scoured Britain for Vici, he continued playing the game. He ordered an expensive sports car and slipped back into the country to get it.
So many opportunities to have fled the country, and yet you kept coming back again. But of course he wanted to live on the edge. He wasn't happy just being an ordinary bank robber.
Provided with information from Italian authorities, British police kept Vici's associates under observation. Their joint effort was Vici's undoing. A month after the heist, police observed the robber leaving an upscale London hotel in his Ferrari. They arrested him as he waited for an export license to take the Ferrari to South America.
He never believed he'd be caught. He should have gone the previous week and the party would have come over to South America. But he stayed on. And had he not stayed on, you'd have never seen him again.
Tell me a little
In
more
custody, Vici gave the authorities his inside man. Detectives could hardly believe that Parvez Latif was involved.
Looking over your
On
insurance
first
statement.
sight, he would probably have been one of the last people you would have suspected. as being the inside man. He wasn't a strong person, he was a very weak individual. And I really think, even though he was aware of the drama that was about to unfold, I think that during the process of the robbery, that the way Vici conducted it, he conducted it for real. And as a consequence, Latif was genuinely frightened.
Latif was no match for Vici's brand of persuasion.
It was a simple job for Vici to say to him, look, this is the deal. I will rob you a safe deposit center and we can share the spoils.
In the months prior to the robbery, Latif had increased his business insurance from $1 million to $3 million. He had every reason to help Vici with the robbery.
Vici was very aware of the vulnerability of Parvez Latif. His business was not doing well. He was under financial pressure. He was a cocaine user, and Vici had access to a lot of cocaine. So he was able to give Latif everything that he needed. He was able to give him cocaine, and he was able to give him a way out of his dilemma, because Latif was losing money fast.
Eventually, 10 million out of an estimated 60 million pounds worth of gems, precious metals, and currency was recovered and taken to Scotland Yard. Included was the Flick diamond. 1 million pounds worth of the recovered riches was never claimed, including a 150,000 pound necklace of diamonds and rubies, and a 25,000 pound Cartier watch. When all attempts at finding the owners failed, they were auctioned at Christie's in December 1992. Parvez Latif was sentenced to 18 years in prison. The rest of the gang was arrested and served time. Valerio Vici was sentenced to 22 years for the Knightsbridge caper. While in custody, he also confessed to 5 other unsolved robberies in England. That brought his record to 54 robberies in Italy and England.
I said to him, you know, what would you have done if you had got away with this and you hadn't been caught? He said, I would have opened up a drive-in bank and robbed it. Now, he was never, ever not going to rob another bank. It was just really a question of time before he got around to his next one.
After serving only 4 years in England, Vici was extradited to his native Italy. Despite his long criminal history, he was given day release, requiring him to return to prison only at night. In April 2000, Valerio Vici was gunned down on a country road after firing on Italian police. In his car were masks and weapons. At the age of 45, his days as the Playboy Bandit were over. In Germany, an elaborate bank robbery ends in a standoff with police. The lives of 16 hostages hang in the balance. Investigators would soon learn that nothing is as it seems. In 1989, the fall of the wall impacted the city of Berlin in unexpected ways. The promise of a free market economy flooded out, and immigrants flooded in. But skyrocketing unemployment greeted newcomers who found the rewards of capitalism painfully out of reach. Khaled al-Barazi was one such immigrant. A native of Syria, he had been working in radiology at a Berlin hospital. In 1993, he was released from prison on a drug dealing charge and couldn't find work. Desperate for cash and with nothing left to lose, he formulated a brilliant plan that would net millions. he would rob the richest bank in Zellendorf, a wealthy suburb of Berlin. A plan this complex would require help. Khaled recruited his brothers, Muzaffar and Mutaz, as well as his close friend, Durgam Ibrahim. Like Khaled, the men were all out of work. Although it would take months of careful planning, they were eager for a share of the take. On June 27, 1995, when everything was in place, the men put their plan into action. At 10:25 a.m., the peaceful town of Zellendorf was about to become the subject of international headlines. Employees and customers were caught off guard as the gang stormed the lobby. Unnoticed, a teller triggered the silent alarm. The police were on their way. Bettina Eckert was in the bank at the time.
Als die Bankräuber hereinkamen, sagten sie dann zu den Leuten.
When the robbers entered the bank, they shouted at us to get down on the floor. We were frightened. Everyone got down immediately.
The gang held 16 people at gunpoint, 7 bank employees and 9 customers.
Durch meinen Kopf, oder ich habe versucht, Möglichkeiten zu finden, was man tun könnte, um die Lage zu erleichtern, um vielleicht zu fliehen.
My mind was racing. I tried to think of any way to get out of there alive. How could I flee or overpower the gunmen? I kept my mind occupied so I wouldn't panic.
The bank director was secured in his office. The gunman had special plans for him. At precisely 10:30 a.m., police arrived at the Zellendorf bank, effectively trapping the robbers. Robbers who now held 16 hostages. Martin Textor supervised the scene.
Wenn man hört, eine Geiselnahme findet in einer Bank statt, dann ist die erste.
Our first task was to close off the area completely. We were afraid the robbers would flee, and we wanted to make sure nothing happened to endanger the hostages.
In less than 20 minutes, nearly 100 police in bulletproof vests surrounded the bank and evacuated the immediate neighborhood. Armed officers checked all avenues of escape, including a storm drain pipe some 30 meters away. It seemed Khaled's robbery had gone horribly wrong. Trapped inside, Khaled's only means of escape was to try and negotiate. At 11 a.m., Khaled released a hostage with a list of demands. He asked for a car, a helicopter, and a sizable ransom. He gave police 6 hours to meet his demands. They feared that after that, the gunmen might start killing hostages.
Die Forderung der Räuber betrug ja 17 Millionen Mark. Eine ganz schöne Stange Geld, habe ich mir gedacht. Und es war klar, dass wir so viel Geld gar nicht auftreiben.
The robbers demanded 17 million marks, which was an impossible sum.
Gewappnet sein. Natürlich ist Geld vorhanden, allerdings nicht in dieser Größenordnung. Und wir fingen dann in der Befehlsstelle natürlich sofort an, uns Gedanken zu machen, wie wir zumindest an Teilbeträgen.
We gathered as much money as we could and hoped it would be enough.
The freed hostage filled police in on the number of hostages left inside, the number of gunmen, and the type of weapons she'd seen. The list was intimidating.
Es handelte sich um ein belgisches Sturmgewehr,
They had a rifle, 2 pump guns, shotguns, 10 Russian fragmentation grenades, a self-loading pistol, and smoke bombs. It was a regular armory.
Storming the building was not an option. Police could not risk a firefight with hostages inside. Instead, Texter and his men continued to play by the book. They tried to open up negotiations with the hostage takers. Khaled refused to speak with police directly. Instead, he used the very nervous bank director as a go-between.
Das Besondere an dieser Geiselnahme war allerdings,
It made it difficult that we couldn't talk at all with the robbers. It made it impossible to judge their mood.
It seemed Khaled wasn't playing by the rules, and police were running out of time. Optimistic police would give them the helicopter as a means of escape. The men began looting the bank safety deposit boxes. By the time darkness fell around 7 p.m., the deadline came and went. The police were still racing to meet the gang's demands.
wir haben uns darauf vorbereitet, zuzugreifen, wenn wir eine Flucht zulassen.
We prepared for a pursuit in the event the robbers tried to drive away. We got the helicopter in place as they requested. All of this took time.
At 8 p.m., nearly 10 hours into the standoff, Khaled told police through the bank manager he would wait no longer. He said unless their demands were met soon, they were going to start shooting hostages.
Wir hatten keine Chance, die Zustände im Inneren der Bank tatsächlich zu
Whenever we asked the bank's director for any information, the line went dead. So we really didn't have a clue about what was going on inside the bank.
To show he meant business, Khaled put the intended victim on display. Police started making concessions. They gave the gang a partial payment, all the money they could gather in exchange for more time. At 9:30 p.m., nearly 12 hours after the standoff began, 2 unarmed police officers approached the bank. Khaled had ordered them to deliver 5.6 million Deutschmarks, nearly $2.5 million, wearing only their underwear. Gunfire suddenly erupted inside, and the bank went dark.
bis dahin noch gar nicht hatten. Und
When
als
we
der
heard the
Schuss dann
shots,
fiel,
I was immediately afraid they had shot one of the hostages.
Police feared that in not meeting Khaled's demands, they had made a deadly mistake. In Berlin, police feared a hostage scenario at a prominent bank had turned deadly. The news media crowded the scene, awaiting word of the 15 remaining hostages. At 1 a.m., the robbers informed police that the hostages were alive. They had simply shot out the lights. Although they were reassured, anxious hours would pass without further word from the gunmen. Police feared for the hostages' lives. They knew they could not wait much longer. Nearly 17 hours since the standoff began, police received a call from inside the bank. The bank manager told them it had been almost 2 hours since he'd last seen or heard from the captors. It was the lull the SWAT team unit had been waiting for.
bis die Spezialeinheiten eindringen können und insbesondere mit ihren Waffen die Treppe vom Keller nach oben so absichern können, dass die Täter keine Chance haben, an die Geiseln ranzukommen.
When officers convinced me that they could storm the bank in a short time, and with a relatively low level of risk for the hostages, I gave the go-ahead.
At 3:30 a.m., they stormed the bank. Not knowing if it was a trap, the police treated everyone like a suspect.
Relativ rüde umgegangen, weil wir annehmen mussten.
We couldn't be sure that the robbers hadn't mixed themselves in among the hostages. We had to assume that the gunman could be anywhere.
The hostages were cleared of suspicion and removed from the building. Police believed they'd soon have the gang cornered. But as they carefully moved from one darkened room to the next, they found nothing but plundered safety deposit boxes. It seemed as if the gunman had simply vanished into thin air, taking millions of Deutschmarks with them. It would take them over an hour to solve the mystery. The police had been the victims of an elaborate ruse. The gang had escaped beneath their very feet.
Wir haben zu keinem Zeitpunkt damit gerechnet, dass die Täter etwa durch den Keller über einen Fluchtweg vorbereiten könnten.
We never guessed the robbers had a prepared escape route. We checked every way out. We even had the sanitation department send the sewer plans for the area, and we saw that the closest pipe was 30 meters away. It never crossed our minds they could tunnel out.
In the tunnel, police found the captors' discarded masks, weapons, and overalls, but not a trace of evidence to help them identify the robbers. It appeared the gang had gotten away with the perfect crime.
Wir melden uns noch einmal, meine Damen und Herren, Sie
The following day, news of the daring heist spread throughout the country. As police were trying to piece together the scant clues, the press marveled at the clever robbery. Those who lived through the ordeal were angered the criminals were made into heroes. Though no one was physically harmed, the mental torture was long-lasting. Reporter Mechthild Hennecke covered the story.
Also die Geiseln haben auf der Pressekonferenz eben betont,
Many of the hostages suffered from nightmares and insomnia.
diese Geiselnahme, dass sie nach wie vor
One woman said that she thought, this is it for me. I'm going to die here.
Police asked the hostages for help in identifying their captors, but they could not. The men always wore masks and seldom spoke. They hadn't left any clues, not even a fingerprint. The tools found in the tunnel were untraceable. The minivan they had used in the robbery had been stolen the night before. The bank estimated the loss at 4 million Deutschmarks. The 5.6 million marks police handed over brought the total to 9.6 million marks, or $4.3 million. Police surmised it must have taken months to build the elaborate tunnel, which extended from the bank to a nearby storm drain pipe and on to a nondescript garage some 200 meters away. The crooks had to have transported tons of dirt. An operation this size was sure to raise suspicions in the neighborhood. Neighbors revealed they'd seen 3 men driving the same car in and out of the garage several times a day. The garage owner told police that he rented the garage to a man almost a year and a half ago. He assisted a sketch artist with a likeness. It turned out the renter's business card had both a fake name and address. Composite sketches of the three men were publicized in newspapers and on television. Nothing happened. Police set up a hotline for the public to call with information about the robbery. Again, nothing happened. After 2 weeks of getting nowhere, the bank offered a 1/2 million Deutschmark reward. Only then did hundreds of leads pour in, over 400 in a matter of days. One of the calls led police to a Syrian immigrant named Mohammed Al-Karmi. During the course of a 3.5-hour interview, Al-Karmi broke down and admitted his involvement in the heist. Although he had not been one of the gunmen, he had helped build the tunnel and transport the loot. In exchange for a deal from prosecutors, he broke all confidences and revealed the name of the gang's leader, Khaled al-Barazi. Khaled had developed an ingenious plan, but he needed more than the help of his family to make it a reality. That's why he recruited unemployed men he barely knew, like Al-Karmi, to help dig the tunnel. With enough manpower in place, the gang started making real progress. But it would be more than a year before they could put their plan in motion. The men dug around the clock. To avoid detection, they dumped truckloads of dirt outside the city. Khaled carefully thought through every aspect of his plot. He obtained plans for the city's sewers and storm drains. He designed the tunnel to connect with a drain pipe about halfway to the bank, saving the men months of digging. Less than a meter in diameter, it stopped only 30 meters from their target. As the men dug the last 30 meters, cave-ins and flooding slowed their progress. But their desperation kept them burrowing closer and closer to the bank. After 18 months of non-stop digging, the tunnel stretched over 200 meters. It ended less than a meter from the bank floor. With all the hard work behind them, the gang was ready to move.
Auch sonst waren die Gangster gut vorbereitet. In die Bank stürmten sie mit sogenannten Pumps.
From outside the Zellendorf bank branch, police were convinced they were dealing with a robbery gone wrong. Inside, Khaled's plan worked like clockwork. The police played into his hand at every turn. Indeed, while police were scrambling to save the hostages, Khaled and his men were inside the bank feeding them sandwiches. Khaled had thought of everything. As a bank robber, he was as thorough as he was considerate. Khaled planned for the long wait, and by drawing out the bargaining game with police for over 16 hours, he and his gang bought themselves enough time to loot the safe deposit boxes and exit the bank. While the gang members moved bags of cash through the storm drain, the police were still trying to devise a plan to end the standoff. Back at the garage and safely outside the police perimeter, the men split some of the money. They hid the rest.
Be in there. Be in there. Be in there.
Al-Karmi made it home in time to see the final chapter of the standoff play out on TV. The nation's fascination with the story only added to the sense of having pulled off the perfect crime.
Mohamed Al-Razi.
But the intricate plot crumbled when Al-Karmi, the outsider, gave up his new friends. Days after Al-Karmi's confession, undercover agents tracked down and arrested Khaled and his brothers. 2 other suspected gunmen were picked up the following day. Still, the police needed evidence to prove their involvement. While the men were being questioned, investigators searched their homes. They found evidence that their suspects had been spending a great deal of money lately. And there had been some big-ticket items on their shopping list. The suspects, who were all unemployed, had gone out and purchased luxury cars. Police had the gang in custody, but they still hadn't recovered the money.
What was this car for?
They got a tip it was still in Germany, in the attic of a Syrian dentist. There they found a suitcase containing 3.6 million Deutschmarks. The dentist also led them to an additional 1.4 million Deutschmarks stashed in 2 bank accounts. The following year, Al-Karmi and the men he turned in went to trial.
Das waren einfach kleine Gangster.
Ultimately, they were small-timers. They didn't have the kind of criminal psyche that it takes to withstand tough questioning.
At trial on April 16, 1996, Al-Karmi confessed to his role in the heist. His cooperation won him a 6-year prison sentence. Khaled al-Barazi received 13 years for masterminding the heist. Despite his careful planning, he had not counted on Al-Karmi's betrayal. The rest of his gang was also sentenced. Police have never recovered all the money stolen from the Zellendorf safety deposit boxes. Millions of hidden Deutschmarks may await the release of a gang of small-time bank robbers with a very big plan. World War II Germany. U.S. Army officers break through a castle wall and plunder a royal treasure, pulling off one of the greatest jewel heists of all time. In the waning days of World War II, General George S. Patton's 3rd U.S. Army rolled through central Germany and into Frankfurt. The city was in ruins. By contrast, Kronberg Castle remained untouched. Although it was just a few miles north of the city, it escaped the devastation of Allied bombers. U.S. Army officials were amazed by the opulence of the 19th century structure. They decided the 100-room castle would make an ideal officers' club. Weeks later, Germany surrendered. The war was over. Frankfurt became an occupied city. There was no power, no running water, no food, and barely any standing buildings. U.S. forces had to live in tents, eat K-rations, and brave the elements. For the war-weary GIs, stepping into Kronberg Castle was like walking into an oasis of unimaginable luxury. The Army assigned Captain Kathleen Nash to manage the new officers' club. A 42-year-old divorcee, Nash was looking for adventure. She had lied about her age to enlist and became a mess officer. After years of training and service in the U.S., she was shipped overseas. Her new job was a good match. In civilian life, Kathleen Nash had been the assistant manager of the Phoenix Country Club. Now, thanks to the Army, she was running her own country club with the help of 30 German servants. The Army captain was now the queen of the castle.
Make sure you keep cutting.
Days after the club opened, Nash became indignant when the officers started looting her castle. It was a practice all too common in wartime.
Looting of private property or of public property or any kind of looting was absolutely forbidden to the United States Army and to all armies. It is one of the basic rules of warfare that the property of private citizens is to be respected. But it was very hard to prevent people from, picking up what they call souvenirs or trophies of war.
To combat the problem, Nash stationed German servants at the front door as security guards.
Ein Moment. Warte.
A lieutenant who tried to liberate 3 antique rugs abandoned them before being caught. The rugs were returned to their rightful place. When Nash wasn't keeping tabs on the castle's precious antiques, she entertained the troops. She opened the vast wine cellar and threw elaborate parties for the officers. Her patrons were more than happy to trade an evening in a tent for a night in a castle. Major David Watson and Colonel Jack Durant were frequent visitors. Durant was a lawyer before the war. Now the vivacious Captain Nash helped him forget about his broken marriage back in the States. As their relationship grew, Nash remained devoted to her job. But running the officers' club was full of problems. After only a few months, thirsty GIs had drained all 1,800 bottles of wine. Captain Nash's club had run dry.
There's no wine here.
Okay.
While the captain was incensed at officers stealing her rugs, she thought nothing of emptying the wine stores. She sent servants and enlisted men to scour every inch of the castle for more wine. In the subcellar, Corporal Carlton noticed 2 strange wires leading into the bottom of a wall.
In the process of putting things away to protect it from battles and armies that might come through, people walled up things in all kinds of ways, and they did it in France, they did it in Italy, they did it everywhere just to protect it. And so the armed forces of every country got quite good at finding hiding places.
Behind the wall lay 1,600 bottles, including cases of fine French Bordeaux. The lowly corporal had no idea the wine was of an ancient vintage, worth an incomprehensible amount of money. All 1,600 bottles were appropriated. The club was back in business.
So anyway, what happened? I mean, your friend is...
The next morning, Carlton returned to the hidden room to investigate a patch of concrete that was lighter in color than the rest of the floor. He told Captain Nash it looked as if the concrete had been recently patched. She had one of the German servants chisel away the new concrete.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Behind locked doors, Nash and Carlton were amazed at what they had found.
Magnificent. They're beautiful.
Captain Nash shared the discovery
Looks
with
like you were
Colonel
made for
Durant and Major Watson.
Oh, they're incredible.
They were astounded by the beauty of the jewels, as well as their value.
I wish we didn't have to give them back.
Well, to the victors go the spoils. Why should we?
The possibilities were intoxicating. Captain Kathleen Nash, Colonel Jack Durant, and Major David Watson marveled at the beauty of the cache of jewels they had unearthed. For a moment, they contemplated taking just a few of the valuables. Then, they decided to take them all. As an attorney, Durant dismissed the risk. Only the Army could prosecute them for a crime committed on foreign soil. As for the German authorities, it would be years before their court system was operational.
It's been a good night. I don't know if we can make it better.
Nash was elated.
Well,
They would all return to the States in a few months with honorable discharges and a hoard of priceless jewels to finance their happiness.
She should at that time have reported the find to higher headquarters, because inventories had been made of the things in the castle, and so any new find was supposed to be reported to the monuments officers or the town major, as he was called, but she never did that, so that the Army authorities didn't know about this new find.
The conspirators had to figure out how to get the jewels back to the U.S. without getting caught. Since the pieces were so distinctive, they would be easier to move and to pawn if they were dismantled. At first, Nash and Durant used the Army's postal system to get much of their loot out of Germany. Durant sent packages to his brother in Virginia. Nash sent parcels to her sister in Wisconsin. But with each package, they risked customs inspections that could alert the Army to their crime. The group split up to minimize the risk. Major Watson gave his girlfriend in Ireland $2,500 worth of jewelry to safeguard until he was out of the service. He also fenced items, including a priceless Fabergé egg for about $430. Durant and Nash did a little fencing of their own in Switzerland. They pawned enough jewels in Europe to indulge themselves in the most elegant Swiss hotels. Nash was finally living the adventure she dreamed of. She had every reason to believe the fairy tale would last forever. The most priceless of the stolen items still remained to be smuggled home to the U.S. Durant took many of the valuable jewels and flew to England. where he met with his former secretary, Martha Orwig.
During the war.
Where did you get these, Jack?
Since she worked for the UN, she had diplomatic immunity. Her bags could not be searched. Durant asked her to ferry the jewels to the States for him.
Something there for you as well.
Okay.
She agreed. On March 2nd, 1946, Captain Nash's tour of duty came to an end. After 8 months of service, she left the castle for good. Upon her arrival in the States, she would immediately apply for a discharge from the Army. Days later, Colonel Durant was sent to Washington, D.C. He had himself designated as an official courier, so his luggage would be exempt from inspection. The plan went off without a hitch. Durant returned to the U.S. with a bag full of jewels and his eye on a new car.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's me. I'll take it.
Good deal. Great. That's a good deal.
Pleasure doing business with you.
Pleasure doing business with you.
The former colonel paid the $1,400 list price in cash and headed for Chicago to meet Nash. Cashed in more of their take.
Beautiful.
A jeweler agreed to buy 100 of the diamonds. The deal fell through when Durant couldn't produce a customs receipt. Durant feared the jeweler might report him to customs, who might tip off the Army.
Thank you.
The couple had no idea that much worse trouble was brewing across the Atlantic. A colonel at the Army's Criminal Investigation Department in Frankfurt had a royal visitor, Princess Sophia of Hesse.
You think that our jewelry's been stolen from some of the servants?
She was about to get married, and she wanted to know where her jewels were.
I'm getting married, and it's gone.
She explained that the Hesse family lived in Kronberg Castle until the U.S. Army ordered them to leave. The Hesse family was part of the royal dynasty that had ruled the German Empire from the 12th century until the end of World War I. When Adolf Hitler came to power, they were ordered to keep a low profile, or else.
You can say that nearly all the noble families, especially in Prussia, were more or less enemies to the Nazi dictatorship.
Everything. I'm getting married.
Since the Nazis were known to appropriate valuables, the family inventoried their jewels and buried them in the castle.
When did you notice things start to be missing?
Immediately. It's been a long time.
But now, those jewels were gone. The colonel questioned the German servants who had worked at the castle. They revealed that the jewels were last seen in the possession of Captain Nash and Colonel Durant. He was stunned. 2 American Army officers had stolen the Hesse crown jewels.
Once it became a matter of a person in the Army stealing private property, whether it was from Germans or anybody else, then that was a criminal act because everyone in the Army knew under the rules of warfare that they were not allowed to steal things from the citizens of the country.
The colonel was concerned. Both Nash and Durant had already been discharged from the Army.
and divine to the stars.
As such, they no longer fell under military jurisdiction.
Captain Nash.
But the investigator had a plan. All soldiers are bound by hip pocket orders. This means they can be recalled to active duty for a period of several months after discharge. If the colonel could recall them, he could prosecute. He'd have to work fast, though. That period was about to expire. If the couple could stay ahead of the army until that deadline passed, they would get away with one of the greatest jewel heists of all time. Colonel Durant was unaware of the overseas investigation into the missing Hesse Jewels. He had more immediate problems to worry about in the States. The U.S. Customs Service had seized the diamonds he tried to fence through a Chicago jeweler. Durant rushed to bury the remaining jewels along a Virginia road near his brother's home. Colonel Durant told his brother to watch over the buried gems. They were so valuable, he'd never have to work again. Confident their future was secure, Durant and Nash were married. They celebrated the small civil ceremony with a lavish honeymoon. Nash delighted in wearing many of the Hesse crown jewels for everyone to see. The Army moved their investigation to the U.S. to better track Nash and Durant. Investigators were concerned they had gotten married, so they couldn't testify against each other. After weeks of searching, the Army finally found the couple. They recalled Nash to duty with just 1 day to spare. Colonel Durant was also recalled. The couple hid out in Chicago, but investigators found them at a downtown hotel. Both were taken into custody. Captain Nash was given a polygraph, which she failed. She then confessed, implicating both her husband and Major Watson. She would later recant that confession.
We were tired, everyone.
Colonel Durant resisted for days. Finally, he agreed to cooperate by contacting his fences. They agreed to return the jewels, but only if they could do so anonymously. Durant later led investigators to a bus station locker. Inside, they found a small portion of the Hesse crown jewels. The items Durant buried along the Virginia roadside were recovered. The Army also seized valuables hidden at a Wisconsin house belonging to Captain Nash's sister. The theft of the Hesse crown jewels made news around the world.
Well, this, of course, was an extraordinary case for the press and everyone because it involved, people who were relations of the British royal family, Queen Victoria, a castle, a love affair, beautiful jewels. It was just made to order for a lot of publicity.
In Washington, MPs keep a careful eye on a fortune. $1.5 million worth of Hessian crown jewels and heirlooms stolen from Germany. This fabulous hoard comprises the greatest private military theft in U.S. history.
The army flew the suspects back to Germany to stand trial. They charged Captain Nash, Colonel Durant, and Major Watson with theft. They would be tried separately. The royal family attended Captain Nash's trial in Germany. There they saw their family heirlooms displayed as evidence. Nash's defense did not bother to deny that she had stolen them. They contended that she was a civilian at the time of her arrest, and that the army therefore had no jurisdiction. The defense also pointed out that looting was common among troops. Nash said that if she were convicted, thousands of American servicemen would also have unclean hands. The court disagreed. Nash was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in a federal penitentiary. She was paroled in 1952. Major Watson was also found guilty. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The last court-martial was Colonel Durant's. In its opening argument, the prosecution cast doubt on Durant's motives for marrying Kathleen Nash. They argued that Durant married Nash to seal her lips. Colonel Durant was convicted and sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. His sentence was harshest because he was the highest-ranking officer involved in the theft. On August 1st, 1951, the Army finally returned the Hesse Crown Jewels. For the royal family, it was a bittersweet moment. Princess Sophia guessed that slightly more than half of the jewels were recovered. Their damaged condition made them worth just 1/10 of their original value. Jack Durant was released from prison in 1952. If there was any doubt about his motives for marriage, they were now erased. Jack and Kathleen Durant lived as husband and wife until Kathleen died in 1972. It was love after all.